everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the reality show brought to you by the Ayn Rand Centre UK. And we've got a couple of guests with us today. We're joined by our very own Daniel Kraus, normally producer behind the scenes. Welcome, Daniel. How are you doing?
Hey, I'm all right. Although the what's his name still hasn't been confirmed that he's dead. So I'm still sitting
Still
on my
worried.
seat. Marvanisa is who I'm talking about. Still hasn't been a confirmation if he died or not. So
And you're following the news carefully, so you'll break that if it
I'm just
happens during the show.
refreshing tweet. I'm just refreshing Twitter feed to see if someone posts about it.
Fair enough. Well, let's hope it happens. Within the next hour. It'd be nice to be able to release that information here, wouldn't it? And Natan, welcome to you too. You're in Israel, aren't you, at the moment? So welcome to the show again. Good to see you. How are you doing?
Thank you. Excited to be here, as always.
Cool, brilliant. So today we're going to talk about two topics. Later on, we're going to talk about the new definition of extremism in the UK. But first of all, we're going to talk about the growing rift between the US administration and Israel, specifically Netanyahu. The US has made fairly clear in the last few hours that they would prefer Netanyahu to be removed and have a more moderate, possibly more pliable, more malleable character in charge. But we'll have a chat about it and see how people see it as.
Yeah, I think it'd be useful before we get into what you think of this, but particularly Natan, your view from Israel. Before we get to that, I think it'd be good to back up a little bit, provide a little bit of background. And I wanted to start by just focusing on the war cabinet that has existed, since virtually since October the 7th, and how that's been formed, how well that's been working, and how much that seems to have changed in your view across the months since, in terms of how well it's held together, or what the different tensions are within it, or the overall view of it, how solid it is as a unified voice. What was your impression, do you think?
Well, I first I have to say that I don't follow the day-to-day politics that closely, but I am surprised that the cabinet has been pretty solid so far. I was expecting more, I guess, rift and just like more friction in politics. And I thought that, I mean, you do see that. You see kind of cracks maybe starting to, I don't know, like what's the word? Just there's starting to be cracks in the just the general attitude. There's more demonstrations, but I mean, all in all, I think the coalition is holding well. I don't see any reason for it to fall right now. I mean, the kind of leftist demonstrations that you see week to week, meaning usually they hold these protests on Saturday nights. I mean, okay, so some hundreds, maybe thousand people they go out, but it's not going to change anything. I mean, Netanyahu is not, he's not holding his breath due to these protests. So yeah, I mean, there's nothing really in that sense. Israel is kind of going through this without any political dents.
And where those cracks do begin to show slightly, even if they're not pronounced, are they based on humanitarian aid, or the engagement in Rafah that might be forthcoming, or has been promised to be forthcoming? What is the division over exactly? Is it how it's being progressed, or how the hostages are being issues being dealt with? What's the key element to what people tend to split over, either within the politicians level on the cabinet or within the people in the country?
So I think the explicit cracks, they do revolve around the hostages. That's the number one issue that everybody is talking about. So you basically have, but the vast majority of Israelis, I think, they want to continue the war. They want to go at it all the way through. They want Hamas eradicated. I mean, they want victory. But then you do have a very loud, influential voice that's coming more from the left, but it's also, because it's such a there's such a, like a powerful altruistic moral code behind this thing, that you have hostages in need. And obviously we all want the hostages to be released. I mean, the government has to protect their rights. I mean, even from a selfish point of view, but this, it just, even the right or people in the center, they can't really they don't have a really good answer to, well, why not just, do whatever you can to release the hostages, even if it means halting the war, even if it means sending more aid, whatever it takes, just get them out. And I mean, this is the conversation is mainly, it mainly revolves around this issue. So that's explicit, but I would say there's a more kind of underlying motivation. I can't prove it. I mean, I'll have to, you have to really dig into this and excuse me, and look into the what people are saying and all of that. But my estimation is that the cracks that already existed before October 7, they're just starting to come out more now as time progresses. And I mean, basically just people want Netanyahu out. There's I mean, Israel had so many issues before the war. There was a judicial reform discussion and debate, and you had the secular versus Haredim, the Orthodox Jews, and I mean, all these things, but they're really just, I referred to it in the past as the end stages of the mixed economy, where you have all these competing interest groups at each other's throats, and it's basically just a power struggle. So I think it's mainly just about power, just getting Netanyahu out and having your own people in. But because October 7 really trivializes this issue so much, it's not picking up, like it's not gaining traction in Israeli society.
Yeah. Thank you. Daniel, what do you make about this statement coming from the US, especially a few hours ago? I think the Senator Majority Leader Chuck Schumer said something like he wanted elections in Israel. How do you read this?
Well, something I should first say about Israeli politics, just from a little I understand, is whenever I look at these parliamentary systems, I really am starting to hate whatever research I'll have to make, because I just looked up the Israeli parliament, and I think just in the government you have like 9 different like political either parties, blocs, whatever, and then also those 9 have also some subsidiaries, not to mention even what you have in position. So yeah, you really have this like many interests, but yeah, it does seem most of them are united, at least on the when we talk about the Rafah offensive. Most of them seem to be united about it, and the only sort of question around it is the question of the humanitarian aid, which is, of course, what the Biden administration is mostly concerned with. So whenever you talk about, the politics in different countries, some people jump in and say, well, you shouldn't comment on, country that you're not part of. It's none of your business. But I think you could have an opinion. I mean, even as it's problematic if you are a leader of another nation and you say you have a preference for different government. That's always going to be problematic, just because of the geopolitical like considerations. But I think it's something expected. I mean, whatever politician you are, you have a certain ideology and you have a certain preference for people. So in this aspect, I don't think that's crazy to have like an opinion on who should be in charge. What is problematic is, when it comes to Biden, he's so the Biden administration is so split on their actions. On one hand, they want to help Israel. They talk about that their support is not really conditional. We talked about a couple of days ago that Biden was asked if Rafah was a red line for him, if like IDF enters Rafah, if it's a red line, and he said yes, but he would not stop supporting Israel. So I'm not sure what exactly the red line meant. What else could I bring up just before? Yeah, so just something I would say about Biden again. He really is like in this impossible situation, especially with the upcoming election, because whenever he tries to be a bit more pro-Israel, he has the more radical part of the Democratic Party straight up refusing to support him. I think we've seen that in Michigan, it seems like, yeah, if Biden continues to support Israel, they will straight up refuse to vote for him, even if he is the Democratic choice and the Republican pick is Donald Trump. They would rather have Donald Trump as president than someone who supports Israel in any way. And you know, however pro or seemingly pro-Israel Biden is, there is a certain vision people have of American politics and American parties is that Democrats could be really pro-Israel and it wouldn't matter because there's always this perception that the Republicans are pro-Israel, even if they aren't. So yeah, Biden is really in this impossible situation, and the longer we go, the more it does seem like we'll have Donald Trump as a new president because of the topic of Israel.
Well, you're definitely much more generous towards Biden than I would be, to be honest. Biden, who we know just after October 7, provided some support, many more support. And of course, he went into to meet Netanyahu a few days after. And I think mainly to, first of all, show himself he can still stand up next to somebody. And also to probably just set the tone of the retaliation of Israel. And then later on, when he sees that Netanyahu is actually intends to carry out what he promised to do, i.e. defend Israel, finally, he then starts wavering and starts asking for punches to be pulled from Israel, trying to protect the civilian. You use the humanitarian aid as an excuse for Israel to pull back. And then, this setting up of red lines that I wish the Democrats learned what a red line is, because Obama did the same thing. Set the line in Syria, the line was crossed and nothing happened. So that, but the thing that strikes me and slightly annoys me slightly is the kind of senile, confused response that we get from the administration as a whole. Because Biden and Schumer say something, and then you get news from the militaries that they would be happy to help Israel doing a tactical enter of Rafah just in order to hit Hamas. Of course, Hamas has got the last few troops left in the region. I think they're talking about 4 battalions or something. I'm not terribly sure.
I heard quarter of all forces they had.
But do we know how many people actually that entails?
Well, IDF claim. Well, maybe you could count it from that. IDF claims they killed or they eliminated about, last time I checked, I think 12 or 13,000 of Hamas militants. So maybe you could count from that. That means a couple thousands, I guess.
Yeah. And which means for Israel to try and enter Rafah in a pussyfooting situation where they try not to injure civilians or create any damage to any structures, while trying to fight thousands of Hamas fighters. It's asking Israel to put their kids' lives on the line way too much. I mean, how can you call yourself a supporter of Israel if you ask them to do this impossible task? That's crazy.
Yeah, I think a number of things have happened with the US's support across this period of time. You started off seeing 2 aircraft carriers being sent to the region, and now you're seeing 1,000 troops building a port. for humanitarian aid, and that in itself is just the example of where things have changed across the 5 months, and of course the election drawing nearer being a factor within that, but not necessarily the only factor. I think it's interesting that one of my reasons for asking the question is about the war cabinet and the different factions of it, is that I see that even Benny Gantz seems to be okay with a Rafah plan going ahead, although obviously with some emphasis on humanitarian aid, as all of those on the left tend to do. But it's hard to say. It's hard to say from the outside, because there's two aspects that strike me as key here. First of all, you've got the red line that Netanyahu set for the 10th of March. For the start of Ramadan, and of course that has come and gone. Does it mean the Rafah exercise is imminent or not? Well, that remains to be seen. And also that this notion of changing a leadership of a government in the middle of a war for anyone, and that being at the request of your greatest ally, supposedly, that comes as somewhat of a kick in the teeth, doesn't it? How do you react to that aspect of it, Netan? The sort of the support from the US, or the waning support from the US. How has that felt from Israel's point of view? Do you think it's been a surprise, or no shock at all, or what do you think the direction is in the future?
Well, I think first of all, this whole situation is it's morally enraging. I mean, the whole situation is just so illogical. It's so irrational. It's so infuriating what's going on. Israel, I mean, just put the US in the side for a moment. Israel should have gone into Rafah ages ago. Ages ago. I mean, this whole discussion is so irrational. It's like you have the last bastion of Hamas in Rafah. Just go in there. Just attack them and get this over with. Like, what are we waiting for? And the fact that the U.S. is now saying, like, they're having these discussions over Rafah for so long. I mean, Israel should just give him the finger. Like, I mean, maybe not diplomatically in front of everyone, but they should definitely just say, look, why are you not letting us, or why are you against us finishing off Hamas? There's no logical reason. Nothing. I mean, the only motivation that maybe someone has to hinder Israel from going in there and destroying Hamas is, quite frankly, that they don't want Hamas to be destroyed. I mean, there's no reason not to go into Gaza. There's absolutely no reason other than just keeping Hamas alive. So, I mean, this is really enraging. And they're going to make the headlines about Netanyahu. They're going to say all the focus is going to be about Biden against Netanyahu. But if you actually read the statement, that's a completely non-essential issue. That's irrelevant. Because why is Biden against Netanyahu? Or why is the Biden administration, saying Israel should go to elections? The reason is that they don't want Israel to go into Rafah, and they think that Netanyahu is, hell-bent on going into Rafah. So that's the issue here. And there's no way to, whitewash this thing. And just the language that they're using, like, they need a more moderate. I mean, this it relates to our second topic today, but Netanyahu is not an extremist on this issue. If anything, he's super moderate. I mean, he's sending aid into Gaza. He's doing what the U.S. is wanting Israel to do. He's allowing all these trucks, and I mean, Israel should have made them starve to death. That's what Israel should have done. Should say no supplies, no aid, nothing. We're going to win this war as fast and as efficiently as possible. That should have been the rhetoric from day one. And it's like people have forgotten about October 7, like 5 months after, and the US, and it's like, okay, so now we can just forget about the murders and the rapes and all of that. So, I mean, that really is enraging. I had another thing that I wanted to say, but
Well, something I would jump in when it comes to Rafah, and yeah, I'm kind of repeating myself. I told you before, but as Nathan said, yeah, there is no end of this war unless unless IDF goes into Rafah. Like, there's no way around it. And if I try to like steelman whatever arguments the Biden administration or people in general have about this, they really do separate. They think of this is the Palestinians and this is Hamas. These two things have nothing to do with each other. They're completely separate. There is no cause and effect. There is no Palestinian support of Hamas, and that's the way they think of Rafah. Yeah, you could get all these terrorists, and they would say, yeah, we should go out after these terrorists, but the price is too high for them. And the price is, the Palestinian people who they believe are completely innocent, who of course are not. These people shield terrorists. These people protect them. They support them. Hamas after October 7th had a huge surge of support. The Ismail Haniyeh had a huge burst of popularity after October 7th. The Palestinian people support both what happened on October 7th and still support Hamas to a large extent. So yeah, you cannot make this separation. You have to realize Israel and IDF, they are not at war with Hamas. They are not at war with like some specific type of people, a specific government. They are at war with they are at war with the culture that made Hamas possible, that made October 7th possible. And this way they have to completely uproot it and destroy it. Yeah, and there is no way around it, no matter how sad it is that people are dying. There is no other way around it. As I think some days ago we talked about this. There was a quote from Netanyahu that we wouldn't stop 25 kilometers from Berlin just because we didn't want more deaths. You push to the end and you completely destroy whatever culture made it possible and rebuild it from the ground up. And that's the only way it can happen. Otherwise, this will repeat itself.
Yeah. And the fact that of course, fighting Hamas is not clear cut, is it? Because they don't fight in Hamas uniforms. It's civilians that actually use RPGs and guns and improvised explosive devices, stuff like that. So that makes it even harder for the troop on the ground. But going back to Biden and the US and the so-called international community, what strikes me is how they always ask for Israel to pull its punches. They always ask for careful about the going onto the ground and harming civilians, but they never ask for Hamas openly to give up, just to surrender, return their hostages, and just surrender. That would be a peaceful end of the war, wouldn't it? You just ask for Hamas to give up, surrender, give up their own people, give up their own weapons, give up their ideology, and that will be sorted out overnight. But there's never be a call on the direction. And Nathan, I wanted to ask you, people, your family, your friends, the people you work with, do they see the United States differently? Are they getting a bit fed up by this continuous request to effectively die slowly? Because that's what they're asking you guys, aren't they?
I mean, I don't know about my close environment. I mean, we don't get to talk about politics too much, but I think people will just have the same kind of ideas and kind of conclusions that they always had, like, oh, the US is our great ally, but it has politics and you have to kind of negotiate, and it's diplomacy and you have to compromise. And this actually leads me back to the thing that I wanted to say that I forgot. I mean, this is really what altruism causes, because altruism, so it puts this ideal this like moral ideal that you can't really accomplish in life, right? Because you have to sacrifice yourself. You have to, I mean, it's more moral ideal is basically like dying, just negating yourself.
Yeah.
But you can't actually live that way. So that's why they say, well, so there's the moral, which is really unattainable, and then there's the practical, and the practical. So that's what you do when you want to live, and how do you kind of how do you balance the two? And then it's a question of balancing. So you have to always balance between the ideal and the practical. So that whole like altruism, I think, leads in the end to not think in principles. And this is exactly what's happening with the right to self-defense. I mean, the right of self-defense, imagine if someone attacked you in a bar, and I mean, let's say you're fairly robust person. You have your muscles, you're very strong, but people will tell you, look, you have the right of self-defense, but you can only use your left arm. Any other part of your body, you can't use it because you're just too strong. And so this is what it is. I mean, they're just thinking like, well, you have the right the right to self-defense, but so there's always the but. So in essence, the people, Biden or anyone else who says Israel has the right of self-defense, but it shouldn't harm civilians, it shouldn't go into Rafah, it shouldn't do all these things. No, so you don't actually think that Israel has the right to self-defense. I mean, this is what it amounts to. If you have the right of self-defense, then it means that you can use whatever means you have at your disposal to eradicate the enemy, subdue it, and return to normal life. I mean, this is the obligation, the moral responsibility of the Israeli government to protect its citizens and to eradicate the enemy as fast as possible, so we can go back to live our lives as normal, peaceful, life-loving human beings. But yeah, so this whole conception of you have to balance these issues, it makes people unable to think clearly. And if you do try to think in principles, then they think you're dogmatic, and that's not how life works. And we know all the slogans and the idioms. So
yeah, and that altruism leading to pragmatism, ever-changing pragmatism that you're talking about there, you see that evident all the time throughout this, isn't it? That the support there is not a moral support from the US to Israel, but based on the principles. It's based on can you do it in a limited time frame? Can you do it cleanly and quickly without too many bad news stories? And can you clean it up quickly before affecting my election campaign? And all of that way, that prism of looking through things is what affects the amount of support given. And the fact that if I can't work with you, Biden seems to be saying at the moment, then I'd like you change for somebody I can control or at least influence strongly. And this suggestion that always seems to underlie what the statements from the administration in the US, that the humanitarian aid, the military support, there's always this hint that it could be dependent upon you rolling back, being more careful, following our line. All of that seems to be evident here. And one of the things that I think is certainly key is that Biden using the line that Netanyahu is losing the support of the Israelis. I mean, to say that your ally, the leader of a country you're allied with, is losing the support of the people while still trying to work as an ally with them is just abhorrent, it would seem to me. I mean, Daniel, let me come to you. What do you think on this score?
Well, whenever we talk about, I mean, I'm trying to figure out what is this even. Is it, when it comes to Biden, is it pragmatism? Is it, just not having principles, not being able to stand by principles? Because yeah, we've seen this in the past. I mean, not just with Biden, but as you said, with Obama also, saying these are red lines and never actually, standing behind those lines, never actually doing anything about it. And in this case, it works out for us in a sense. It's good that Biden is not actually standing behind the the Rafah red line, although technically we'll see. IDF hasn't entered Rafah yet, but I have my doubts about if Biden will. I mean, he already said he won't, so it's not a huge mystery. But it would be interesting to see if they actually did hold up against Israel, because that would prove something much horrible. That the fact that the United States can only stand up to the actual like Western countries, like that's the only one we'll have principles against the people who actually try to be good, who actually try to defend themselves, but we allow all sorts of dictators just to go around with no problems. That's what I would find really scary. But again, I'm sort of betting on the unprincipledness of Biden and the Biden administration.
I have to say, yeah, this is really ominous. I think it's kind of I mean, it's kind of scary. Like, where is this going to lead? Because I've read an interview. It was published this week with Alan Dershowitz, the Jewish lawyer, and it was published on Globes. If anyone wants to read that interview, it was fairly interesting. He made some really good observations there. And I mean, I don't like him like in particular. He's kind of a lefty. He's always been. And I remember reading his book, the Moral Case for Israel, and he was very altruistic there, very very much about how he was lavishing like how Israel defends civilians when it engages in war. And so he's got all of that, but he was really, what was striking in that interview is that he was very perceptive about how ideas are very important, and ideas are the barometer of where the culture is going. And he was pointing to the universities in America, and it was saying, look, these kids right now that are pro-Hamas, like in 20 years from now, they're going to be the leaders of the country. They're going to be the people who run the politics of the future. So he was actually sending kind of a warning message to Israel to think about life after the U.S. just pulls its support from Israel in. And I think, if you are looking at this long range, I mean, I think it could happen. And what Biden is doing right now, it's kind of ominous. It's kind of it's a prelude, I think, to what's going to happen in the future. And I also want to remind you that this whole thing is happening on the backdrop of the U.S. Slapping sanctions on settlers in the West Bank, Jewish settlers. So whatever you think about them, I don't know who they are, these people, these individuals. I don't know if they're really, if they engaged in violence. Maybe they have. Maybe they initiated violence against Palestinians, against just people that had no reason to do that. But I think that this is a kind of an escalation that is very dangerous for the future, for the relationship between Israel and the United States. I mean, who knows what's going to happen 20 years from now, right? Israel could go down its own bad path of nationalism and mysticism and all that. But it is ominous, I think.
Yeah, and of course, everything is exacerbated by the coming election. Both, well, there are lots of elections this year, but the presidential one in the United States is the one that affects the issue the most, isn't it? That's why I think Biden is. Well, when I say Biden, I mean the administration. I mean, I don't believe Biden has got much to say or dictator. I'd like to know exactly who's dictating all this kind of stuff, but never mind. Going back to my train of thought, that's why the administration is building the support for humanitarian aid. That's why they've been dropping aid, which is a stupid idea anyway, because first of all, they killed a couple of people on the ground because the parachute malfunctioned. And second, you can't really target the aid to the people who should receive it. God knows how many Hamas fighters actually capture most of the aid. So you end up helping the enemy and making the thing last even longer. But the issue is that it seems to me that the Democrats are actually trying to play the audience a bit by, oh yeah, we support Israel. Yeah, go ahead, Israel. At the same time, trying to appease the Muslim vote, which turned out to be a bit more significant than they expected. I think in Biden's election at the primaries, I think that the worst case scenario of the what they call the uncommitted voters was up to 10%, turned out to be 13%. And I'm sure that the various pollsters and the political office in the Democrats are quite nervous about it.
And that recent hot mic moment, the supposed hot mic moment of Biden commenting on a come to Jesus moment for Netanyahu, is like an aside to that vote, that uncommitted vote from the Muslim left. I think. I mean, I'm always a little suspicious of so-called hot mic moments and moments when politicians are walking up Downing Street and accidentally showing the papers in their hand to the cameras on the way into number 10, because that's been done so many times now that sometimes that's a way of presenting news out there, getting a pithy statement but put out there that you couldn't say as part of a podium speech, but nevertheless expresses a view to a certain category of people that you're choosing to let slip your true opinion for a moment. So who can say whether that's the case or not, whether he is just so incompetent that he said what he shouldn't have done, because that's equally possible when it comes to Biden. What was your view on that, Netan, or was there something else you wanted to add just then?
I didn't see that incident actually, but I mean, look, everybody's saying, well, it's the election, like he's doing this because of the election. Yeah, but what does it actually mean? Why is he doing that? For the election? It means that he has an actual constituency of people who don't, who were basically pro-Hamas, like they're just anti-Israel, and so I mean that's a real huge problem.
For sure, yeah.
Daniel, what do you think about it?
The statement?
Yeah.
I mean, it's been known for a long time that Biden doesn't like Netanyahu. I mean, that's what we talked about at the start, that he would like to replace him. As I said at the start, I think it's okay for like politicians to have a preference for a political leader. But again, I think that's why it was sort of like as you said, hot mic statement, is because you don't really want officials to really talk about replacing heads of states and like other nations. But yeah, not much else I have to say about it.
I just want to say that, like, I don't care if Biden or whoever says like I don't like Netanyahu. I hope Israeli public would replace him. Like, whatever. That's like his opinion. It's not like I have any affinity for Netanyahu. I dislike him just like any other politician, I guess. But I mean, the issue is really his opinion, right? It's like it's why he dislikes Netanyahu, at least in this incident. It's because he just doesn't want Israel to go into Rafah. So I mean, I'm repeating myself, but that's really the heart of the issue. And he could say that. I don't care if he dislikes Netanyahu. That's fine.
What's more relevant, as you said before, is what the real support of the US is for Israel and what that is based upon, and what it's based upon in the future. Whether it's just habit and tradition, whether it's just the fact that there's a Jewish community, the diaspora in the US. Whether it's an actual belief in the moral superiority of Israel, whether it's got pragmatic concerns about things like intelligence coming from Israel and that being useful to the US. So many factors in there that do tie the countries together, but aren't necessarily enduring reasons for the relationship that's existed to endure into the future. That remains to be seen, particularly under the current test that it's undergoing. But yeah, we shall find out, and we shall keep covering it on this channel day by day to bring the latest to you on this.
Sorry, and of course, it would be nice if the only country in the world which is founded on a principle of freedom and equality under the law came out in favor of Israel for the right reason, rather than because of pragmatic calculations. And that's the real sad thing. The country who should more understand the need for freedom and the need for defending it.
And that's when you come to trying to support the West's values in the face of the uncivilized alternative that exists across the world.
Yeah. And I think in the beginning there was like that moment, right? There was like this light bulb moment of, we have to protect our friends, our allies. What we saw was barbaric, and so it's like the culture, at least the better parts of the culture, they at least they could grasp that, even if not explicitly. But you just don't have the intellectual force out there to sustain it and make it endurable and really point to the essentials of the issue. And yeah, so that's why we just see this slow, gradual kind of deterioration of standing up for the right causes.
Yeah. Well, when it comes to not pointing to the essentials, this is a key element of our second topic for discussion today. When it comes to the issue of extreme.
Well, before we jump into that, I have two quick things to say. First, someone said in the comment that Trump would have been making threats to these Islamic leaders backing Israeli efforts 100%. I would just say, so far, every dictator Trump met, he really liked, just as an off statement. But we also have a super chat from Phil. Thank you so much for £10. He said, over 85 years ago, Jews in the East End of London woke up to the fact that appeasement is a recipe for disaster and kicked the shit out of black shirts, as did Churchill. So why is Gaza even a thing?
Yeah, good question.
Yes, it's a good historical reference. It's a good analogy. But the 80 years of descending pragmatism in between, and are some of the reasons behind that, I think, for sure. Yeah. Did you guys want to comment on that on the super chat?
I mean, I don't agree that Trump would. I think if he is elected, I think people will be surprised, at least his former supporters, or the better of his supporters from the past. They'll see that he won't. I have this. I mean, I can't know for sure, but I just have this hunch or speculation that he won't stand so much in favor of Israel, and we'll see kind of a. I mean, we'll probably see a lot of pragmatism in the beginning, but yeah, we might see some hostility too.
Well, hopefully by the time Trump gets elected, if he gets elected, the war would be over. I mean, yeah, it's still like a year until there is a new president of the United States. So if by that time Israel is still at war with in Gaza, yeah, we probably have much bigger problems.
Yeah, but let's not forget that the war in Gaza is just kind of it's a distraction. I mean, the real issue is Iran. So that's going to stay for at least.
Yeah, I think the dangerous thing is that I think there was a statement by Netanyahu to the families of the hostages, and they say something like things in Qatar are progressing well, which only points to the fact that he's trying to cut a deal with Qatar in order to get the Hamas to release some of the hostages. And that means that it's not going to go into Rafah, and that means it's not going to wipe out Hamas entirely. I just hope, if I were him, even if he finishes my career, I would just cut the deal and then go into Rafah anyway and wipe out Hamas, because you cannot deal with evil to this extent. You have to do everything you can to effectively cut its leg and stop leeching off the good. So that's what I do. But hey,
and his legacy is dependent upon that for sure. Yeah. And just to Phil's super chat there about the East End, and I think one of the things that's evident here in the UK, as we move to the second topic to talk about that as well, I think is the lack of knowledge about the history of events such as the one you're describing there, because those kind of examples that aren't taught to children and to students. And it really doesn't provide the right background, because all students are learning today is about the oppressor and the oppressed, but not in terms of what you're talking about in terms of Cable Street, etc.
Let me just quickly jump in again. We have a super chat from Frank. Thank you so much. And he's asking, is the painting of Balfour damaged beyond repair? I think it's referring, there was this young crazy girl, let's say, basically slashing a painting, destroying it.
Yeah, the painting can be repaired, or we can even do without. However, the brain of these young people, I think, might be well beyond saving at this stage. I doubt that we have the will and the ability to stand up to this kind of stuff officially and strongly. Even though politicians make the right noises, I'm not very confident.
The painting was slashed in a couple of places and sprayed with red paint. This is the painting in the Cambridge University, isn't it, of Lord Balfour? It possibly can be, to some extent. Whether it will be, even from a political point of view, or the intent of the University of Cambridge has hardly been particularly strong on some of these things, as all of the campuses in the US, similarly equivalents to Harvard, etc., have not always held the right line on this. So we shall see. Is the truth of the matter, but it's just an example of what's going on, really. And
it's such a concrete example of just people attacking values that are so important for human beings. I mean, it's just disgusting. It really is. I'm just angry just remembering of that incident right now.
And the nihilism that it demonstrates, and the fact that nihilism is always progressively worse, isn't it? And you start off with environmentalists damaging frames or throwing plastic fronts to paintings, doing things that won't actually damage the original work. And then before long, somebody takes it a step further with a different cause, and you end up with out and out destruction.
Yeah, and it's always these nice and like classical paintings. It's never any of the modern random type of art. They never attack those. So it really is an attack on values.
No one would give a crap if somebody slashed one of those pieces of crap.
It would simply be a critique, really, or a work of art in itself.
It would just make it better, yeah. Okay, guys, if you have any more comments about this one, Netanyahu and US.
Okay, so let's look at this extremism thing now. Although this is supposed to be a clarification, like anything the British government does, it ends up being more woolly the more you read of it than you knew at the start, doesn't it? So let me just tell you what the situation was before today, because back in 2011 they described what extremism was in the course of setting up the law as a quote vocal or active opposition to fundamental British values, including democracy, the rule of law, individual liberty, and mutual respect and tolerance of different faiths and belief, unquote. That's what we've had so far, which in many ways you'd think would be enough to have policed things like the protests that occur every couple of weeks in London. But the new definition, did you want to read out what that one was?
I can't stomach you, go ahead.
Fair enough. So the new definition that's been outlined today, this has been outlined by Michael Gove, who is, even his job title is enough to make me vomit, but it's the Levelling Up Housing and Communities Secretary in the UK. The new definition of extremism, and bear in mind that one of the things the government's doing here is they're not changing the law, they're just sort of making it clearer, kind of. This is what they say. The new definition will define extremism as, quote, the promotion or advancement of an ideology based on violence, hatred, or intolerance that aims to do three things. 1, negate or destroy the fundamental rights and freedoms of others. 2, undermine, overturn, or replace the UK system of liberal parliamentary democracy and democratic rights. And 3, intentionally create a permissive environment for others to achieve the results in either 1 or 2. If you can work out what the difference between what I read initially and what this new one is, or what this will actually mean, if it doesn't mean a change to the law, what is your first reaction to everything you've heard of this story, Daniel? Let me come to you first.
I mean, I'm quickly jumping on like all the definitions. I mean, even when it says liberal parliamentary democracy, if I argued for a presidential republic, does that count? I mean, hopefully not. I mean, I'm sure it doesn't. But yeah, these like all terms, again, intolerance. I mean, objectivists are incredibly intolerant, depending on how you define it. I mean, you know, there is this something that's often talked about is the paradox of intolerance. You know, when you have a tolerant societies that are tolerant of intolerance, well, that intolerance will eventually overwhelm the tolerant ones and will, you know, overcome it. So yeah, what does it mean to be intolerant? Again, like whenever someone talks about Islamophobia, I always want to say, well, I am Islamophobic, as well as I'm Christian phobic, and you know, even Judaism phobic. I don't like any religions, but if I spoke out against religion, does that count? Does that count as some sort of like hate crime? And again, so as you said, this doesn't seem like any new law. It's just a clarification. But this clarification isn't helping me much. Because again, ARCUK is based in UK. Should we be worried about what's going to happen? They're supposed to publish a list of organizations. Hopefully, we won't find ourselves there.
Netan?
Well, right now they only block funding. I don't know how much funding you're getting from the UK government. So
you'd be surprised. You'd be surprised because lots of these what would you call us groups and institutions and stuff are actually registered charities, i.e. that they get a financial benefit or even sometimes special funding from the government as cultural events. So you'd be surprised how much money you could actually cream off the taxpayer in Britain if you just tell them that you're just working towards cohesion of the community, those kind of crap.
We're not talking about ARCUK here, obviously.
No, ARCUK is actually a for-profit, proudly for-profit institution. In fact,
we have shirts that come with that that can be ordered on our website.
All right.
Yes, all right. Yeah. If you support the kind of point of view that we provide through the analysis of the news, just help yourself at leaving either super thanks after the stream or during the super chats. Make your comment, ask your questions, and leave some money behind.
Please, yeah.
Thank you very much. Michael Gove, Mr. Creep himself, from the Conservative Party run Department of Communities, also went as far as mentioning five what are they called? Are they institutions?
Organizations that they wanted to put on this initial list.
They shoved there some one called British National Socialist Movement and the Patriotic Alternative, which are, despite the name socialist in one of the groups, they're actually far right organizations. So fair enough. But also it includes in this list the Muslim Association of Britain, something called CAGE, which is effectively just a pro-Muslim activism and all sorts of stuff.
Yeah, I can tell you a couple of words about CAGE, for example. Their tagline is that they're supporting our heroes from Guantanamo to Gaza. They are trying to challenge the war on terror and its inspired state oppression. That gives you a flavor of where they're coming from.
Yeah, and another one, MAND, which is again a Muslim-based organization, who's trying to gather support among Muslim voters and activists in order to further the benefits of Islam.
There's supposed to be a bigger list coming out in 2 or 3 weeks. And at the moment, this list has only been mentioned by Gove with parliamentary privilege inside the House of Commons, which if he repeated those statements outside, many of these organizations have already said they would challenge it in the courts.
Yeah.
So already it's a baptism of some question here, was whether this has got off on the right foot even. So yeah.
Talking about tolerant society, these guys, as soon as you say something that they don't like, they threaten a member of parliament. But Daniel, we're talking about extremism earlier on, and if we are talking about extremism, the new definition. As you said, as objectivist, I feel pretty much very much on the extremist side when it comes to freedom of the individual and freedom generally and capitalism. But this seems to be a word that is so often used to smear people. Ayn Rand actually wrote an essay about it, the extremism and the art of smearing. Netan, how do you feel about this great innovation that the UK government is going through?
Yeah, I mean, we don't have too much time to discuss this issue, but first of all, I just want to urge everybody, read Ayn Rand's essay on extremism, the art of smearing. It's a very, very important essay, incredibly, even 60 or more years after she wrote it. I mean, I won't be able to repeat everything or even convey it right now as smoothly and objectively as I would want to, but extremism is an anti-concept. You cannot define it because it doesn't refer to anything in reality. I mean, is liberal democracy, that's extremist, right? It's extremist if you compare it to fascism, communism, if you compare it to absolute kings of Europe, from the past. It's extreme. It's even far more extreme than living in tribes, like 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 years ago. So, I mean, this doesn't mean anything. You can be extremely stupid or you can be extremely smart. So, this whole notion is just it's really an attack on our ability to be able to discuss things from a fundamental perspective, to actually look into the essence of issues, to the core heart of things. So I mean, what it says here in the BBC article that you sent us, that they want to block groups that promote ideologies of violence, hatred, or intolerance. So I mean, think about how much disregard you have for ideas that you think about something like to block the promotion of hatred. It's like, well, let's wage war on hatred, let's wage war on anger, let's wage war on fear, let's wage war on your emotions. They're just your automatic emotions, and why do people are okay with it? Well, because those are bad emotions. I mean, we don't like hatred, we don't like fear, we don't like anger, but those emotions are actually, I mean, they're the tools that nature provided us with, so we can deal with reality. I mean, they have a place in our being and in our ability to navigate the world and judge things. So hatred is important, just like love is important. I mean, you need to hate people who are evil. You should hate evil ideas. So I mean, everything here is just it's so stupid, really. It's a sign of a culture that's just not willing to think. It's like we don't have high reverence for ideas, for thinking in conceptual terms.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, in our context, I mean, going back to this change in definition, it's just, again, another electoral ploy to look appealing to the electorate, because although it says absolutely nothing, as Richard pointed out from the previous one, it looks strong. It looks like you're making a stand. When then the reality is that police, when they so-called police, or at least go along to these protests, that then arrest a guy who states that Hamas is a terrorist organization, instead of arresting the people who chant from the river to the sea, or carry hateful slogans and symbols. So
it's the exact opposite of taking a stand. I mean, it's literally showing your intellectual impotence. Like you just cannot actually discuss the issues. You don't know how to, think in principles and fundamentals. So you say, oh, well, let's just be moderate. Let's just stay somewhere in the middle where it's a middle that's undefined, and we don't care to actually understand what this is in the middle.
Yeah, the worst thing you can do in this situation is just not pronounce a moral judgment. Just sit on the fence and say, oh, everybody's the same. There's a bit of black and white in everyone, but by which you assume that the good is actually smearable. You can bring down the good because you make a stupid statement in the first place. Daniel, what do you think?
Well, when it comes to extremism, and I think Netan mentioned it, it really is an anti-concept. It tries to put into one thing, basically, on one part, maybe consistency or something like that, just being consistent. Extremist Muslims are just Muslims who are consistent with whatever they believe. Consistent, I don't know, Nazis just fully go, consistent socialists just fully go into the area that they believe in. And it tries to, I think, on the other hand, tries to put in violence. Whenever someone talks about extremism, it's implicit that they are violent. So when you call, and I think that's what it tries to do, when anyone calls objectivist an extremist, I think what it's on one hand is actually saying is that we are consistent, but what is trying to imply is that we would go on streets and just murder people just because we're extremist in this idea. So that's why, yeah, you never really should use this concept, because again, yeah, we are extremists, but it has that package of violence in it that I don't think anyone here would support.
Sure. Yeah. And this issue is not going anywhere, and the UK government's not going to stop weaseling out of trying to define anything more precisely than it's already done. And you're going to see some practical examples on the streets, no doubt. And as this progresses outside of Parliament and the bigger list comes out, we'll undoubtedly cover it again, I'm sure. But I guess that kind of brings us to the close for today. There's the next show, I guess, Daniel, will be the Daily Objective tomorrow. And the reality show following that as well. So please join us all for that. Thank you guys for joining us today.
Thank you.
And we'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.